Bitch, come to my motherfucking shit, bitch. You gon' get laid the fuck down. You understand?
In Birmingham, Alabama, two women were connected by one man. One would live, one would die. On July 7, 2023, a confrontation between 36-year-old Justina Wallace and 21-year-old Aaniyah Nowden ended with blood on concrete and a family shattered forever. Both women were pregnant. Both women had children with the same father. Both believed they were fighting for their future. What drives someone to take a life over a shared relationship? What happens when jealousy and possessiveness collide with raw emotion and a loaded weapon? The story of Justina Wallace isn't just about a domestic dispute gone tragically wrong. It's about the dangerous intersection of love, betrayal, and violence that exists in neighborhoods across America every day. It's about what happens when early signs of conflict are ignored until it's too late. Justina Wallace was holding her 2-year-old daughter when she was shot during an argument with Aaniyah Nowden in Birmingham's Norwood neighborhood. The dispute centered around their relationship with the same man. Both had children with him, and both were currently pregnant. Despite emergency medical intervention at UAB Hospital, Wallace died from her injuries the following day. Nowden was arrested and charged with capital murder. She claimed self-defense, but evidence, including social media posts showing her with a firearm weeks before, suggested a different story. Before we continue with Justina's story, I want to talk directly to you for a moment. Stories like this one affect communities across the country, and chances are someone watching right now knows someone in a volatile relationship situation. That's why I'm asking you to engage with this video in 3 important ways. First, if you've ever witnessed conflict escalation in relationships around you, drop a comment below, sharing what you think friends and family should do when they notice these situations. Your insight might help someone else watching this video. Second, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you can join our community that discusses these important social issues with respect and empathy for the victims. We examine these cases not for entertainment, but to learn and prevent similar tragedies. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who might benefit from understanding how quickly relationship conflicts can turn deadly, share this video with them. Your single share might reach someone who desperately needs this perspective. Now, let's examine who Justina Wallace was before her life was cut short. A mother, a provider, and a woman whose story deserves to be told with dignity and purpose. Born and raised in Birmingham, Justina Wallace was a 36-year-old woman whose story began long before her tragic end. Friends described her as determined and resourceful, someone who faced adversity with quiet strength rather than complaint. Though public records offer limited details about her early years, those who knew her spoke of a woman who prioritized stability in an often unstable world. Growing up in economically challenged circumstances, Justina developed practical skills that would later serve her family well. Stretching limited resources, finding creative solutions to everyday problems, and maintaining dignity despite financial pressures. She was known for her straightforward communication style and unwavering loyalty to those she considered family. Despite having no formal higher education, Justina was street smart and possessed natural intelligence that helped her navigate life's complexities while maintaining her core values of family first. Motherhood defined Justina's existence. Her children weren't just responsibilities, they were her purpose. While many parents balance childcare with personal ambitions, Justina's ambitions were her children. She measured success not by career advancement or material acquisition, but by her ability to keep her children fed, sheltered, educated, and emotionally supported. Each morning began with getting her children ready for school, ensuring they had breakfast and clean clothes. Evenings were spent helping with homework, despite her own educational limitations. Neighbors recalled seeing her walking her children to school regardless of weather conditions, carrying her youngest while holding another's hand. Her home reflected this child-centered focus, modest furnishings, but walls adorned with children's artwork and school achievements. When financial constraints tightened, her children never felt the full impact because Justina absorbed most hardships herself, often going without so they wouldn't have to. In her neighborhood, Justina was seen as the embodiment of resilience. Local shop owners remembered her counting pennies at the register while insisting her children could pick out small treats, a testament to her prioritization of their happiness amid financial constraints. Her daily reality involved navigating challenges that many take for granted. Unreliable transportation meant long waits at bus stops with children in tow. Limited access to health care resulted in home remedies for minor illnesses, and the absence of affordable childcare meant bringing children along to appointments and job interviews. Fellow parents in similar circumstances formed an informal support network, taking turns watching each other's children and sharing resources. Within this community, Justina was respected for never complaining about her circumstances, while simultaneously never settling for less than what her children deserved. This dichotomy, acceptance of her reality while fighting to improve it, characterized how she lived each day. At the center of this tragedy was a complex web of relationships connecting Justina Wallace, Aaniyah Nowden, and the father of their children. Unlike the clear-cut narratives often portrayed in media, this situation evolved through years of shifting loyalties, intermittent commitments, and emotional entanglements that defied simple categorization. For Wallace, her connection with this man represented stability, a co-parent who, despite their romantic relationship's fluctuations, remained involved in their children's lives. She had built family routines and future expectations around this understanding, investing years in a relationship she believed had permanence despite its flaws. Nowden, at 21, entered this dynamic later, bringing youth and a different set of expectations. To her, the relationship represented potential and promises of a different future. The significant age gap between the women created inherently different power dynamics with their shared partner. The man at the center maintained relationships with both women simultaneously, moving between households and creating an unsustainable emotional ecosystem. Neither woman originally entered their relationship expecting to share their partner. Yet both found themselves negotiating an unwritten arrangement that satisfied no one and created fertile ground for conflict. The identity of the man connecting these women remains largely absent from public records, yet his actions shaped the events that followed. He maintained separate households with each woman, effectively living dual lives while fathering children in both homes. Financial support became a flashpoint of contention. With limited resources stretched between two families, accusations of favoritism emerged. When Nowden became pregnant while Wallace was already expecting another child, the financial pressure intensified, heightening competition for both attention and material support. Text messages recovered during the investigation revealed a pattern of comparison between the women, with phrases like, "At least she doesn't complain about money," or "she takes better care of the kids," being relayed between parties. These communications fostered insecurity and resentment on both sides. Family gatherings became battlegrounds when the man's extended family appeared to favor one woman over the other. Birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and casual family events were marred by subtle expressions of preference, further isolating each woman and intensifying their need to defend their position in the family structure. This triangulation created an environment where both women felt continuously insecure about their standing and fought to protect their children's place in this fractured family system. What began as passive aggression escalated into direct confrontation over several months. Initial interactions at child exchanges were marked by cold formality, but as both pregnancies progressed simultaneously, encounters grew increasingly hostile. Witnesses described a pivotal incident at a local school event where both women attended to support their children. What should have been a celebration of academic achievement devolved into whispered accusations and public discomfort when seating arrangements placed them in proximity. School staff later recalled the visible tension that required teacher intervention. Social media became the contemporary battlefield where private disputes found public expression. Cryptic posts about respecting relationships and knowing your place accumulated on both women's accounts. These digital confrontations allowed for passive-aggressive exchanges visible to mutual acquaintances, amplifying embarrassment and resentment. Phone records showed escalating communication patterns, calls at unusual hours, text message volleys lasting hours, and attempts to contact the man simultaneously. Friends reported both women expressing fears about losing their position in the family structure. By June 2023, just weeks before the fatal encounter, the situation had deteriorated to the point where mutual friends refused to attend events where both women would be present, sensing the volatile atmosphere that threatened to explode. Digital footprints painted a clear picture of deteriorating boundaries in the months before July 2023. Nowden's online presence shifted noticeably. Her posts transformed from typical young adult content to more confrontational messaging. The most concerning development appeared 6 weeks before the shooting. Photos showing Nowden posing with a handgun, captioned with vague statements that could be interpreted as threats. Wallace's social media activity showed a different pattern, increasing privacy settings and fewer public posts, suggesting a retreat from potential online confrontation. However, friends received private messages expressing her growing concern about Nowden's behavior and unpredictability. Both women's mutual connections reported uncomfortable online interactions where supporters from each side engaged in argument threads that further inflamed tensions. These digital exchanges created a documented timeline of conflict escalation that moved steadily from verbal disagreements toward suggestions of potential physical confrontation. Several critical moments could have altered the trajectory toward violence. After a heated argument at a child's birthday party in May 2023, family members separated the women but failed to address the underlying conflict or seek professional mediation. Attendees later admitted they wouldn't want to get involved in drama. A neighbor witnessed a verbal altercation outside Wallace's home 2 weeks before the shooting, but didn't call authorities, considering it just another argument. The shared father acknowledged to investigators that he recognized the intensifying hostility, but believed they would work it out eventually. Local community centers offered conflict resolution services that neither woman accessed. The children's school counselor noticed behavioral changes in the children reflecting home stress, but was limited in intervention capabilities without parental consent. Each of these moments represented crossroads where intervention might have prevented the ultimate tragedy, but remained unexplored paths. Psychologists who reviewed the case identified classic patterns of territorial behavior exacerbated by pregnancy hormones in both women. The dual pregnancies created a biological and psychological pressure cooker, both women experiencing physical vulnerability while simultaneously feeling threatened by the other's pregnancy. Experts point to the concept of maternal gatekeeping, the instinct to control access to children and family resources, as a fundamental aspect of the conflict. For Wallace, her established position as the mother of his children was threatened. For Nowden, her future status and recognition were uncertain. The age difference played a crucial psychological role. Wallace, at 36, represented stability and history, while Nowden, at 21, represented youth and potential. This created an imbalance where each woman felt simultaneously superior and inferior to the other, a volatile psychological dynamic that fueled insecurity, defensiveness, and eventually tragic violence. July 7th began as an unremarkable summer day in Birmingham. Temperature records show it reached 91 degrees by noon, a typical Alabama summer Friday. Justina Wallace started her morning with a routine familiar to any parent, preparing breakfast, dressing children, and planning afternoon activities to keep them occupied during summer break. Around 11:30 a.m., Wallace received a series of text messages that visibly upset her, according to her oldest child, who later spoke with investigators. These messages prompted Wallace to make several phone calls, speaking in hushed tones away from her children. By early afternoon, Wallace had arranged for her sister to watch most of her children, keeping only her 2-year-old daughter with her as she prepared to meet someone. She changed outfits twice, suggesting anxiety about the upcoming encounter. Security camera footage from a nearby convenience store captured Wallace purchasing a soda at 2:37 p.m., appearing distracted and checking her phone repeatedly. This would be the last ordinary moment of her life, a mundane transaction 43 minutes before the confrontation that would end it. At 3:05 p.m., Wallace arrived at the Norwood location where the fatal meeting would occur. Multiple witnesses observed Wallace pulling into the parking area of the Norwood residential complex, her 2-year-old daughter secured in a car seat. Nowden was already present, waiting near her vehicle with a female friend. Neither woman was alone, a detail that would later complicate questions about premeditation versus spontaneous violence. According to witness statements, the initial exchange appeared calm, 2 women standing approximately 10 feet apart, talking. The conversation lasted nearly 4 minutes before body language shifted dramatically. Nowden's friend backed away as Wallace stepped forward, gesturing emphatically. A resident watching from her window described Wallace pointing repeatedly toward her own vehicle, where her daughter remained strapped in the car seat, potentially referencing her children in the conversation. Another witness reported hearing Wallace's voice rise, saying something about respecting boundaries. What happened next occurred in less than 30 seconds. Wallace turned toward her vehicle, possibly to retrieve something or to leave. Nowden reached into her purse, extracted a handgun, and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The first shot missed. The second struck Wallace in the back. The third hit her as she turned, entering her chest. She collapsed onto the pavement as neighbors rushed from their homes, some calling 911, others attempting to help. At this point in our examination of this tragic case, I want to pause and acknowledge the gravity of what we're discussing. These aren't just details in a story. They represent real moments when lives changed forever, including the life of a 2-year-old who witnessed violence no child should ever see. This is why your engagement with this video matters beyond simple metrics. By liking this video, you help our content reach people who need to understand how quickly domestic situations can escalate to violence. If you've been watching silently until now, I especially encourage you to join the conversation below. Share your thoughts on what communities can do to identify potentially violent situations before they reach this point. Your perspective might offer insight others haven't considered. For those who work in education, healthcare, or law enforcement, professionals who might encounter early signs of relationship conflicts, please consider subscribing to our channel. We regularly analyze cases like Justina's to identify intervention points where professionals could make a difference. The most powerful action you can take today is sharing this video with someone who works with vulnerable families. Education about relationship violence patterns saves lives, and your single share could reach someone positioned to prevent another tragedy. Now, let's examine how authorities responded to this devastating situation. Birmingham Police Department responded within 7 minutes of the first 911 call, arriving at 3:20 p.m. to find Wallace unconscious and bleeding while bystanders attempted compression techniques. Officers secured the scene while paramedics transported Wallace to UAB Hospital in critical condition. Nowden remained at the scene, the weapon placed on the ground nearby. Officers recovered the 9mm handgun, which ballistics later confirmed matched the 3 shell casings found in the parking area. Investigators documented the position of vehicles, blood patterns, and witness locations using standard grid photography techniques. Detectives collected 27 witness statements over the following 48 hours, establishing a timeline corroborated by surveillance footage from a nearby apartment building that partially captured the interaction. Mobile phones from both women were secured with proper warrants, revealing the text exchange that preceded their meeting. Forensic technicians recovered gunshot residue from Nowden's hands and clothing, establishing her as the shooter beyond question during the preliminary investigation. During initial questioning, Nowden asserted she acted in self-defense, claiming Wallace threatened her verbally and reached toward her purse during their confrontation. "I thought she was getting a weapon," Nowden stated in her recorded interview. "I was protecting myself and my baby." This defense strategy faced immediate challenges when investigators noted Wallace was shot in the back, suggesting she was turning away rather than advancing threateningly. Further, no weapon was found in Wallace's possession or vehicle. Nowden's attorney later refined the self-defense claim, arguing that his client perceived threats based on previous hostile encounters and feared for her safety due to alleged previous statements by Wallace. They presented text messages where Wallace had used harsh language weeks earlier during an argument. The prosecution countered with evidence that Nowden had brought the firearm to the meeting location beforehand, suggesting preparation rather than spontaneous defensive action. The Jefferson County District Attorney's Office charged Nowden with capital murder, citing two aggravating factors. The killing occurred in the presence of a child under 14, Wallace's 2-year-old daughter, and the victim was pregnant at the time of death. At the preliminary hearing on July 15, 2023, Nowden's legal team requested bail, emphasizing her pregnancy and lack of prior criminal record. Judge Marcus Williams denied this request, stating the heinous nature of the offense and the strength of evidence necessitated continued detention. The grand jury returned an indictment on August 3, 2023, advancing the case to circuit court. Nowden's pregnancy complicated legal proceedings, with the defense filing motions for special medical accommodations during detention. The prosecution also considered additional charges related to the death of Wallace's unborn child, but ultimately focused on the capital murder charge, which carries potential penalties ranging from life imprisonment without parole to the death penalty in Alabama. The conflict between Wallace and Nowden represents what psychologists term mate-guarding behavior. Evolutionary responses activated when perceived reproductive rivals threaten established relationships. In polyamorous or concurrent relationship situations without clear boundaries and mutual consent, these instincts intensified dramatically. Both women experienced what relationship psychologists call comparative anxiety, constant evaluation of oneself against a perceived rival. This produces hypervigilance about signs of preferential treatment, creating cognitive distortions where neutral actions are interpreted as threats. For Wallace, maintaining her position as the established maternal figure was threatened by Nowden's youth and new pregnancy. For Nowden, securing legitimacy and recognition within the family structure became increasingly urgent as her pregnancy progressed. This rivalry activated primitive brain regions associated with survival and protection, the limbic system's threat response, bypassing rational thought processes. Each interaction became filtered through threat assessment rather than logical evaluation, creating a psychological environment where violence became an increasingly probable outcome despite neither woman having violent histories. Pregnancy introduces significant hormonal fluctuations that affect emotional regulation. With both women experiencing these biological changes simultaneously, their capacity for emotional control was compromised during a period requiring exceptional stability. Financial insecurity compounded these emotional challenges. Court records revealed both women depended heavily on their shared partner for economic support, creating practical anxiety about resource allocation between households. Sleep deprivation, common in pregnancy and when caring for young children, further diminished emotional regulation capabilities. Wallace, caring for multiple children while pregnant, and Nowden, experiencing her pregnancy while working, both faced physical exhaustion that degraded decision-making and impulse control during their interactions. Evidence suggests elements of both planning and impulsivity in Nowden's actions. The presence of the firearm indicates preparation, yet witness accounts describe an interaction that escalated rapidly, rather than an immediate attack. Forensic psychologists note that premeditation doesn't always involve elaborate planning. It can manifest as flash premeditation, where a person quickly formulates intent moments before acting. The 3 shots fired in succession suggest controlled action rather than panic. The prosecution emphasized Nowden's social media posts with the weapon as evidence of prior intent, while the defense characterized the shooting as a stress response triggered by immediate perceived threat, highlighting how blurred the line between premeditated and impulsive violence can become. In the days following Wallace's death, the Birmingham community mobilized to support her children. A candlelight vigil drew over 200 attendees to the Norwood neighborhood, where residents established a temporary memorial with flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten messages. Local churches collected donations for funeral expenses and childcare needs. Mothers from her children's school organized meal deliveries for Wallace's family and established a rotation schedule to help with childcare. A permanent memorial bench was installed at the community park where Wallace often took her children, bearing the inscription, "In memory of a mother whose love continues through her children and community." Local news outlets initially reported the incident as another statistic in Birmingham's crime reports. As details emerged about the relationship dynamics, coverage shifted to examine broader issues of domestic conflict. Television coverage prompted community discussions about resources for families in similar situations. Talk radio programs fielded calls from listeners sharing personal experiences with complex family structures and relationship conflicts. Online forums debated responsibility and prevention, with commenters divided between those focusing on individual accountability and others highlighting systemic failures in support services. The case became a reference point in local debates about gun access regulations and court-ordered mediation for domestic disputes involving children with shared parents. Wallace's mother assumed guardianship of her grandchildren, creating a household suddenly expanded by grief. "These children lost their mother, but they will never lose her memory," she stated at a community forum on domestic violence prevention. Wallace's siblings established a foundation focused on mediation services for co-parenting conflicts. They partnered with local social service agencies to develop educational materials about recognizing relationship conflict patterns before violence occurs. The children's father has maintained a public silence, but court records show he filed for full custody of his children with Nowden, while continuing visitation with Wallace's children. A complex family aftermath that continues to evolve through the court system. Relationship conflicts that may turn violent often display observable indicators before physical aggression occurs. These include sudden social media behavior changes, like posting images with weapons, increased isolation of involved parties, children showing unexplained behavioral changes, and escalating public arguments. Digital evidence often provides the clearest documentation. Aggressive text messages, threatening social media posts, and location tracking apps used to monitor partners. Friends report noticing when someone constantly checks their phone with anxiety or becomes secretive about communications. Community members and family can identify these behavioral patterns by paying attention to changes in communication styles, increased tension during child exchanges, and expressed fears about another person's unpredictability. Effective intervention requires both timing and approach. When friends or family notice relationship tensions escalating, direct conversations acknowledging observed behaviors can break patterns of conflict. Phrases like, "I've noticed things seem tense between you two," open dialogue without accusation. Professional mediators offer neutral, third-party perspectives when emotions prevent productive communication. Court-appointed mediation services, while available in Birmingham, remain underutilized due to lack of awareness. Research shows intervention effectiveness depends on timing. Earlier engagement has higher success rates. Community members often hesitate, fearing they'll make things worse. But relationship violence experts emphasize that neutral third-party observations often interrupt escalation patterns more effectively than direct confrontation between conflicting parties. Accessible mediation services require expanded funding and community awareness. Birmingham's existing family court system offers mediation, but appointments often take weeks, too long when conflicts escalate rapidly. Gun access regulations could include temporary restrictions during documented relationship conflicts, similar to systems implemented in 14 states. School counselors need expanded authority to intervene when children display behaviors indicating home conflict. Current protocols require parental permission, creating barriers when parents are the source of tension. Community education programs teaching conflict de-escalation techniques at neighborhood centers would create local resources for intervention before police involvement becomes necessary. These programs have shown 47% effectiveness in reducing domestic violence incidents in communities where implemented. Justina Wallace's true legacy lives on through her children, individuals who experienced her dedication firsthand and will carry forward her values of family commitment and perseverance. While her life ended tragically, Those who knew her emphasized that a single moment of violence cannot erase years of maternal devotion. Her sister described Justina's parenting philosophy. She believed children need consistency more than perfection. This approach manifested in small daily actions, reading the same bedtime story repeatedly, maintaining holiday traditions despite financial constraints, and creating stability within unstable circumstances. These consistent acts of love form her enduring impact, shaping her children's understanding of commitment despite her physical absence. This case highlights how relationship violence extends beyond traditional definitions of domestic abuse. When complex family structures lack clear boundaries and communication channels, conflict can accelerate without typical intervention points. Prevention requires recognizing that relationship violence exists on a spectrum that begins with verbal confrontations and possessive behaviors long before physical aggression occurs. Effective response systems must address these earlier stages. Law enforcement, family courts, and community resources must adapt to modern relationship complexities, including blended families, concurrent partnerships, and co-parenting arrangements. Traditional intervention models designed for conventional household structures often miss the unique dynamics present in cases like Wallace and Nowden's situation. As we conclude Justina Wallace's story, I'm asking you to transform this moment of reflection into concrete action. This channel examines these cases not merely to inform, but to prevent future tragedies. If you've experienced insights during this video about relationship conflict patterns, please share those realizations in the comments. Your perspective might provide exactly the words someone else needs to recognize similar patterns in their own life. Subscribe to join our community, committed to understanding the complex human factors behind these cases. We approach each story with respect for victims and a commitment to learning from tragedy. Most importantly, share this video with someone working in education, healthcare, law enforcement, or family services, professionals positioned to recognize early conflict indicators. One shared video could provide the insight needed to identify a volatile situation before violence occurs. Thank you for engaging with Justina's story with the respect and thoughtfulness it deserves. Until next time, stay aware and stay safe.